BBC Wildlife magazine is for everyone interested in wildlife and conservation. This month, David Attenborough reminisces on 30 years of travels from Zoo Quest to the Living Planet. There's a colourful article on the secrets of Australia's Great Barrier Reef. A look at one of Britain's rarest animals, the pine marten. And the magic of kingfishers around the world. Just some of the features in the new BBC Wildlife magazine.
On BBC Two in a moment, the cuddly owl Mike Harding begins a new series taking his own brand of northern humour across the water to Belfast. And a new drama serial starts tonight here on BBC One when a husband mysteriously goes missing from home. That's in 25 minutes at 9:25 and follows our look at the main stories and events of the day in the 9 o'clock news now with John Humphreys.
Transport unions join the miners' battle. They're offering to black the movement of all coal. Liverpool's day of action tonight, still no agreement on the budget. Mrs Thatcher orders a security review in government and the forces. Anger at Greenham, the cruise convoy goes out again. In Jordan, an ancient city fit for a queen. And in London, a riot staged for a princess. Good evening. The miners have tonight won new support from some of the country's most powerful unions. The leaders of 6 unions have decided that there should be a total ban on the movement of coal. They represent railwaymen, seamen, dockers and lorry drivers. And if their recommendation is accepted, it'll be a big escalation of the dispute. The miners' president, Arthur Scargill, says it'll strengthen the resolve of miners already on strike. And the leader of the steelmen, Bill Sears, said it would leave most steelworks without coal within a fortnight. The ban could come into operation next week. John Fryer was at this evening's meeting in London.
The leaders of the main transport unions have been backing the miners, but it hasn't made much difference so far or any real impact on industry. But tonight they went much further than expected, as the miners' president explained.
The trade unions who were represented here today fully understand the situation in the mining industry, and having taken cognizance of that situation, have given the assistance that you've heard about. I must say that I'm delighted with the assistance that's been offered, and naturally it demonstrates the solidarity of the trade union movement. Those facts will be related to our membership, and I'm quite certain that it will strengthen the resolve of miners currently involved in national and area disputes within the mining industry in an attempt to save pits and jobs.
Tonight's decision lifts the dispute onto a different plane. Before this, the railwaymen had simply been asked not to cross picket lines. Now they'll be stopping all movement of coal, whether or not the miners themselves keep on digging it. But the most immediate impact's on the steel industry, the most vulnerable coal user. No more so than at Ravenscraig. Train drivers have refused to cross picket lines, and seamen have blocked some coal imports. But the main unions in the power stations have advised their members to ignore NUM pickets. The miners, anyway, have turned most of their energy against each other, and so far there's been no pressure on industry or the government.
The miners' president, Arthur Scargill, said today that the strike is widening. He says 85% of collieries have now stopped work. But Mr Scargill said there was naked intervention by the government in the dispute. The police were operating as a paramilitary force, and he said the government seemed determined to smash not only the miners, but every trade union. The Home Office Minister Douglas Hurd said officers drafted into the Nottinghamshire area had been issued with equipment including riot shields under what he called standard arrangements. County councillors from Nottinghamshire met ministers to try to get help with the extra cost of policing. They estimate £3 million has been spent so far, and that will rise to £5 million by the end of the month.
By the left, quick, march!
The huge cost of the police operation, of which Nottingham must bear half, has been a shock at the end of the financial year. Already facing a penalty for overspending generally, the delegation was asking that their share of the police bill is given special treatment and not included in their normal budget.
The government have so far accepted that in the exceptional circumstances that Nottingham is facing, it would probably be wrong for us to have to pay penalties. But the government haven't yet made up its mind whether they will exempt us from penalties on the whole of the money or only a part of it.
Having got this concession, the councillors went on to the Home Office to seek an exceptional cash grant. But this time they were told no.
Arthur in Minder, tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
This is Thames from London. Yet to come, the local news headlines. The big movie Deadfall, starring Michael Caine, after News at 10.
Mrs. Thatcher doesn't get the money from the market. The Kent miners' claim against the police is dismissed. The prison governor's murder, a civil servant is charged. Invincible gets safely home to Pompey again. And the champion jockey John Frankham is fined for not trying. Good evening. Britain has not got the money Mrs. Thatcher wanted from the Common Market Summit in Brussels. The talks ended in the past hour without agreement on budget reforms. The Italian Prime Minister, Signor Craxi, said Mrs. Thatcher had paralysed the summit, and he said Great Britain was to blame. Mrs. Thatcher and the other leaders talked on for several hours past their original deadline, but no new limits were agreed for Britain's contributions. A separate crisis developed when the Irish Prime Minister, Dr. Fitzgerald, walked out of the summit protesting about the new quota system for milk production.
When Mrs. Thatcher arrived at the European summit this morning, she was being widely criticised by other European delegations for an inflexibility likely to lead to a collapse of the talks. In the event, though, it was Irish Premier Dr. Fitzgerald who brought proceedings to a grinding halt in the late afternoon over EEC plans to drastically reduce milk production. With the Irish economy heavily dependent on milk, his farmers protested outside the council building again today. The European Council made some concessions towards Ireland's wish to increase rather than cut production, but Dr. Fitzgerald said it was not enough and walked out, refusing to support the plans for financial reform and a vital increase in EEC resources, which need unanimous backing to take effect. This morning, President Mitterrand tabled new proposals to control community expenditure, increase the overall budget, and restructure the system for assessing national contributions along the lines Britain wanted. This afternoon, the full Council began intensive and detailed negotiations over how much Britain's EEC payments should be cut under the new formula. Mrs. Thatcher originally wanted Britain's net contributions limited to about £300 million a year. This afternoon, she apparently offered to pay some £390 million, but the community was still demanding £590 million.
Mrs. Thatcher is about to give a press conference in Brussels. If it's in time, we'll bring you news.
Kent miners have failed to win a High Court injunction against the police to prevent them stopping flying pickets from travelling to other coalfields. The Kent miners' leaders said they'd sue for damages instead. Today, 124 pits were out. That's 9 more than yesterday. Only 38 were working fully, with 13 part producing. More than 7,000 extra police were drafted into the coalfields overnight. The miners' president, Mr. Arthur Scargill, said they'd turn the Midlands into a paramilitary state. Tonight, more pickets and police are on duty in the Nottinghamshire coalfield, but the men are still going to work at all 25 pits.
The 2 Kent miners named at today's hearing were stopped by police in the Dartford Tunnel on Sunday night on their way to picket other coalfields. They left the High Court having failed to get an injunction against the police, alleging false imprisonment, obstruction and causing a nuisance. But the Kent Union president said it